The morning sunlight poured in. Through the long glass windows of Sterling Memorial Hospital, streaks of gold flashing across the pristine white tiles of the lobby. Nurses in pressed uniforms moved quickly but carefully, their shoes squeaking faintly with each step. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and panic, for in one of the top floors, behind closed doors guarded by men in suits, a billionaire was fighting for his life. Everyone in town knew his name, Howard Ellison, the man who built empires from nothing but ruthless cunning and relentless ambition. He owned banks, factories, media houses, and had politicians under his thumb. His wealth wasn't just money. It was power that bent laws and shaped destinies. Yet now, with 15 of the world's most respected doctors circling his bedside, all that power meant nothing. Machines beeped frantically, screens blinked red, and specialists muttered in hushed tones that carried only one dreadful certainty. The man was slipping away. His vitals are collapsing again, one cardiologist snapped, sweat beading across his forehead. Increase the dosage, another said, her voice trembling despite decades of experience. Already maxed out, the anesthesiologist muttered, his eyes glued to the monitor. They had flown in from London, Zurich, Boston, experts whose services cost millions per hour. Yet even together they looked like frightened students in the presence of a puzzle too, great for human understanding. The billionaire's body was betraying him in ways no medical book had ever recorded. Outside the secured ward, a crowd had gathered. Journalists tried to shove their microphones past the men in black suits. Business partners waited, pale with fear for their fortunes tied to Ellison's survival. Some whispered prayers, others whispered calculations of who would inherit what, and somewhere in the far corner of the hospital, pushing a mop across the hallway floor, a young man worked quietly, unnoticed by the storm brewing upstairs. His name was Daniel White. To the doctors, the nurses, the guards, he was invisible, the janitor's son, a thin, pale figure with striking blue eyes and hands, calloused from scrubbing tiles and hauling trash. His father had been the hospital janitor for 20 years, a man who never raised his voice, never stepped into anyone's way. But Daniel was different. His silence wasn't obedience. It was thought. Deep, unbroken, restless thought. Ever since he was a child, Daniel saw patterns others didn't. To him, the world wasn't just noise or chaos. It was a language written in invisible ink, the way dust floated in shafts of light, the rhythm of people's footsteps, the sequence of beeps from medical machines. All of it spoke to him, telling him truths hidden from ordinary eyes. Teachers had called him strange. Classmates had called him crazy. But Daniel never argued. He just watched, listened, remembered. Now, as he moved his mop across the floor, he overheard nurses whispering, in panic, "They say Mr. Ellison won't last till evening. 15 doctors and none of them can figure out what's wrong. Imagine the lawsuits, the disgrace." Daniel paused, his grip tightening around the mop handle. He didn't know Ellison personally, but he had read about him. A man larger than life, untouchable, unbreakable. Yet something inside Daniel stirred. Not curiosity alone, but a certainty, as though some hidden part of him already knew what others could not see. Later that afternoon, chaos thundered through the hospital. The billionaire's heart had stopped for the third time. Doctors rushed in with paddles, shouting, "Clear!" as his massive body jerked from the electric shocks. Assistants scribbled notes in panic. Security shoved everyone further away from the ward. The air was electric with dread. Daniel, carrying a bucket of soapy water down the hallway, stopped at the sight of the closed-off area. Men in suits barked into radios, warning that time is running out. But while others looked on with fear or curiosity, Daniel's sharp eyes flickered toward the monitors glimpsed through the glass. He saw the jagged lines, the irregular pulses, the flicker of red numbers that had doctors scratching their heads. To him, however, they were not chaos. They were a code, a rhythm that didn't match what textbooks said but echoed, something he had once observed in his father's failing. Radio at home? Daniel frowned, his mind racing. He remembered the radio's circuits, the way interference from an outside frequency caused distortions that mimicked failure but weren't failure at all. Could it be? Before he could think further, a hand gripped his shoulder. It was his father, old Mr. White, his face creased with exhaustion. "Son," he said quietly, "don't linger. They don't like staff loitering here. Come." Daniel nodded, but his eyes lingered on the machines one last time before turning away. Something was wrong, something that no medicine could fix. That night, the hospital didn't sleep. Neither did Daniel. In their small apartment above the janitor's storage closet, Daniel sat hunched over scraps of paper, scribbling diagrams and equations. His father, too tired to argue, simply sighed and closed his eyes on the cot. By dawn, the news was worse. The billionaire was unconscious, sustained only by machines. The doctors were baffled, exhausted, defeated, and somewhere inside Daniel's restless mind, the answer clicked. Not a medical answer, not the kind that came from books or degrees, but a truth drawn from observation, intuition, genius. He knew what was killing the billionaire, but who would listen to a janitor's son? The morning sun rose pale over Sterling Memorial. But in the top floor of the hospital, the mood was darker than midnight. 15 doctors stood in silence around Howard Ellison's bed, their faces hollow from sleepless hours. The machines that kept him alive beeped like fragile threads about to snap. They had tried every drug, every procedure, every miracle science had to offer. Nothing worked. Daniel White stood just outside the guarded door, clutching the crumpled notes he had scribbled through the night. His heart pounded not with fear for himself, but with the certainty that he carried the answer no one else could see. He stepped forward, but 2 black-suited guards blocked him instantly. "You don't belong here, kid." Daniel's jaw tightened. "If you don't let me in, he'll be dead in an hour." The arrogance of his words stunned them. A janitor's son daring to speak above doctors, above the elite. One of the guards shoved him back. But the commotion drew the attention of Dr. Klein, the lead physician, his gray hair matted with sweat. "What's this nonsense?" the doctor snapped. Daniel met his eyes and spoke firmly. "You're treating him for heart failure. You're wrong. It isn't his heart. It's interference. Look at the machines. Those irregular spikes aren't natural. His pacemaker isn't failing, it's being jammed. The signal's corrupted. He's being poisoned by his own device." For a moment, silence filled the corridor. Some scoffed. Others exchanged nervous glances. Dr. Klein hesitated. Then curiosity cut through his pride. He ordered the pacemaker disconnected and replaced with an external pulse monitor. Within minutes, Ellison's numbers stabilized. His breathing eased. Color returned to his cheeks. 15 world-class doctors gasped as life returned to the man they had given up on. Daniel stood quietly, his blue eyes steady while the ward erupted in awe. The billionaire's empire had been saved not by money, not by science, but by the unseen genius of a janitor's son. And for the first time, the world looked at Daniel. White not as invisible, but as the boy who saw what nobody else could.